of the Legal Committee of the National Assembly, Mr. Ngô Văn Tuấn, member of the Party Central Committee, Deputy Auditor General. With regards to our chairs of the session, Mr. Vũ Hồng Thanh, member of the Party Central Committee, Chairman of the National Assembly's Economic Committee, and Mr. Nguyễn Thành Phong, member of the Party Central Committee, Vice Chairman of the CPB's Economic Commission. With regards to our speakers today, may I introduce Mr. Lê Minh Ngân, Vice Minister of Natural Resources and Environment, Vice Minister of Construction, Vice Rector of the National University, and former Vice Minister of Natural Resources and Environment. And our moderator is from the National Assembly and representative of ADB, and the president of Ho Chi Minh City Real Estate Associations. And may I also introduce representatives of central committees and commissions, ministries, agencies, localities, research institutes, universities, international organizations, embassies, some economic groups, and the business community, scientists. Once again, I would like to warmly welcome all participants to our thematic discussion today. Next, may I invite Mr. Vũ Hồng Thanh, member of the Party Central Committee, Chairman of the National Assembly's Committee for Economic Affairs, and Mr. Nguyễn Thành Phong, Deputy Chairman of the CPB's Economic Commission, to chair our discussion.
Kính thưa quý vị, để mở đầu chuyên đề 1, tôi xin trân trọng giới thiệu.
Ladies and gentlemen, to start our first session, I would like to invite Mr. Nguyễn Thành Tùng, the chairman of the Law Committee of the National Assembly, to make presentations on the improving of lawmaking process, complete legal system, and enhance law enforcement efficiency, the important solutions for institutional reform. Please be ready. Mr. Trần Thanh Mẫn, member of the Politburo, standing Deputy President of the National Assembly, Mr. Nguyễn Tảng, the Director of Ho Chi Minh National Politics Academy, Vice President of the National Assembly's co-chairs. Within the framework of the Socio-Economic Forum 2022, the Law Committee will make presentations on improving the quality of law building process, complete the legal system, and enhance the law enforcement efficiency, and important solutions for institutional reform. The full text has been circulated to all of you, so I would like to make a brief presentation. We can see that this is a requirement for any countries. No countries except a few that have abundant natural resources can become a high-income countries without strong institutions. A lot of studies show that the close interactions between institution and prosperity of countries. For Vietnam, the reform and ameliorations of the institutions is very important. This is all seen as one of the core tasks in a socio-economic development process and clearly reflected through the documents of the Party Congress 13 that to complete the legal system and institution is seen as one of the three breakthroughs. The 13th National Party Congress also requires to reform the institutions in order to remove all the bottlenecks, mobilize all the resources for the rapid and sustainable development of the countries. institution building of our countries has achieved some encouraging results. Many indexes on innovations and reform have been highly regarded. After 35 years of reform, the reports at the 13th National Party Congress emphasized that the legal system has been fundamentally improved. The law of the process of legal building has been paid due attention to. In the first year of the 2021-2026 term, law building continues to receive the due attention despite the impacts caused by COVID-19. We have achieved some remarkable outcomes. First, we have been timely institutionalized all the policies of the party and the government to help the people to overcome the consequences of the pandemic. For the first time, the government has authorized the National Assembly to pass out special resolutions related to ensuring the socio-economic and the social welfare of the people with far-reaching impacts in order to timely respond to the emergencies. In the first time in the 67-year history, we need strong and practical solutions in order to foster the recovery. The National Assembly convened the first irregular meeting in order to timely respond to the context and to meet the expectation of the people for a National Assembly of action accompanying the government for the interest of the nation and the people. And second, have to remove all the overlapping and bottlenecks in the legal system to turn challenges into opportunities for development. In the recent time, the review of legal documents to remove all the challenges, particularly in investment and business, has received due attention. Hundreds of legal document bylaws and decrees have been reviewed by the ministry to indicate all the overlapping and inconsistencies for the solutions. And we also point out 137 legal tasks requiring all the competent authorities to actively study, come up with the proposals to submit to the National Standing Committee of the National Assembly. To date, 63 tasks have been completed ahead of schedule. This is a very encouraging result, reflects the sincerity and the high determination and responsibilities of all the competent authorities and the business communities. With the mottos, the National Assemblies of Actions, the National Assemblies and its committees have actively involved in the legal building process and has created a lot of breakthroughs. The National Assembly has worked together with the party caucus to develop the orientations for the development up to 2045. This is a very important legal document approved by the Politburos, focusing on the key task to implement during the National Assembly terms in order to mobilize the resources and remove all the institutional bottlenecks. In law building process, the National Assembly involved in all the review and the approval process from early and from afar, so that we have been timely to handle a great workload in terms of sensitive and difficult issues arise. The National Assemblies and the commissions under the National Assembly will take into account all the scientific and practical grounds for final decisions. The National Assemblies and the committees under the National Assembly has conducted all the activities under the virtual format to respond to COVID-19. Therefore, even during the outbreak of COVID-19, a huge workload was completed in line with the schedule. And this has been proved relevant and effective. The National Assembly and the Standing Committee of the National Assembly is considering to adjust the operational regulations to further improve the efficiencies. The implementation, the enforcement of the law has also been enhanced. From the 15th National Assembly, all the committees of the National Assembly have actively conducted all the activities to supervise and to enhance the efficiencies of all the activities. Throughout this process, all the committees have been able to identify all the bottlenecks and come up with timely solutions to remove. At the third meetings, the National Assembly conducted the review on the implementation of the law to issue Resolution 61 and the complete of the legal systems and come up with the recommendations for the solutions for 2030, 2025, 2030. And the National Assembly also worked together with ethnic councils to implement the supervisions of all the resolutions of the ethnic councils. Besides however, there's some certain shortcomings. The predictability is not yet that high. Some of the institutions are yet updated, amended. The consistencies of some of the regulations is still limited. There have been any breakthroughs in the applications of new business model in the digital economic era. There's still some delays in related to this process. The resolution of the 13th National Party Congress identifies that by 2045, Vietnam will from a developing low-income country to a high-income country. Therefore, this period is of historical significance with a lot of challenges. Reality has shown that over the past 50 years, only few countries can transition from low to middle-income countries. Therefore, institutions play a very important role. It poses a lot of challenges to the reform of the institution in Vietnam. We have to look at the emergence of the economic nationalisms. Additionally, COVID-19 continues to exert great impacts on our socio-economic recovery, and it requires us to implement a very important task regarding the reform and the completion of the legal system. First, we have to develop, promulgate quickly, effectively, implement legal documents to respond promptly and effectively to the pandemic, handle new and unprecedented issues, at the same time protect people's health and life, amend and supplement the legal provisions which, due to the change in the situation, are no longer suitable with the reality and causing obstacles and hinder development, accelerate the transformation of growth model associated with economic restructuring towards sustainable, inclusive and green growth, promulgate legal documents to address new fields arising in socio-economic life, create a necessary and open legal framework for development in which focusing on a number of aspects such as accelerate the digital transformation process, build a digital society, digital government, digital economy, and fourth, continue to improve, consolidate, and raise the effectiveness and efficiency of the social security system, take people at the center to ensure the social progress and justice, ensure a more balanced and development among economic regions and fields, thereby affirm the socialist nature of Vietnam's market economy. And therefore, we have to continue in order to achieve these goals, we have to focus on the following four solutions. First, to continue to strengthen the capacity of actors involved in lawmaking and enforcement, responding to reality, actively listen to feedback, and consult with experts, scientists, association, business, and the community. Continue to study and improve the legislative process, strengthen. And we also have to continue to be innovative in thinking, awareness, and approaches of subjects in participating in lawmaking. And third, we need to continue to study and improve the legislative process, strengthen discipline in lawmaking, strongly apply information technologies in activities of the National Assembly and its agency. And fourth, strengthen supervision of the National Assembly, especially over the organization of law enforcement and legal documents, strengthen the review of practice, strengthen the guidance of law enforcement and interpretation of the law in order to identify the overlapping and incompetent components. Ladies and gentlemen, it can be said that the innovative applications of the breakthroughs in a legal building process will continue to be important factors to lay a legal framework for Vietnam to successfully achieve all the socio-economic development targets as outlined at the 13th National Party Congress of Vietnam. Thank you very much for your kind attention.
Thank you, Mr. Hoàng Thanh Tùng, for the presentation with practical comments and assessments on lawmaking and the improvement of the legal system and efficiency of law enforcement. And you have also put forth many important solutions for socio-economic recovery in the coming time. Ladies and gentlemen, the real estate market is considered as one of the important components of the economy. Developing a transparent and favorable real estate market will bring opportunities to attract domestic and foreign capital, creating resources for socio-economic development. Therefore, developing the real estate market as we continue to restructure the economy, transform the growth model, and improve the competitiveness of the economy is very important. To continue the program, I would like to invite Professor Dr. Hoàng Văn Cường, Vice Rector of the National Economics University, to present the presentation on impacts of land policy on real estate market and solutions for issues in land portion. May I invite Professor Đặng Hùng Võ to prepare. Next. Ladies and gentlemen, representative from the CPP's Economic Commission, the Committee for Economic Affairs, scientists, participants, my presentation will focus on two objectives. The first one is the relationship between land policy and investment in real estate, and from there we can adjust our policy towards the two draft laws that the National Assembly are working on. My presentation will cover 5 points. The first one is that the impact of land policy on the behavior and the benefits when changing land use. The third is the land use duration and its impact on the behavior. How can we determine the land use duration? The fourth is the value added from land and real estate. And from here, we can work out the recommendations and solutions. And the final point is on the trading, on exchange and the replacement of the traditional method. And all these points have been covered in my intervention in the hands-out materials. I will be very brief in my presentation. So when we change the purpose of the land, we create the value added of the land. So when the government changed the land use, we transform the benefit from that land to other types, and it creates inequality among investors who assign the land by the government and who have to do that themselves. and the inequality during the privatization. So the land will result in many benefits once its use is changed. And so we have to manage properly the benefits arising out of the change of land use. With regards to this, we propose 3 solutions. The first one is the valuation of land. We understand that each land has their own purpose, and we can only evaluate the land according to its use, because we have to use a number of methods to determine the valuation of the land. So, like when a person who really likes that land will be willing to pay more for the land than those who don't really want the land. So we suggest that in the law, we must determine the price of the land in accordance with its market price. And we also suggest that the authorities must revoke the land when the government decides to invest in the projects, rather than the investors themselves set the price for the land. So at the moment, we are applying the agreement among investors. So the first way is the people will contribute the land and become one of the investors. And the second is that the people will agree among themselves on the price of the land. And the second way to determine the price of the land is through auction. And we know that the purpose of land auction is to pick up the investors who are the most competent and who can use the land most effectively. And in this case, the best investor is the one who can make the most of the land. So for the land without a specific purpose, then each investor may use the land for a different purpose and will result in different economic or environment impacts. So we have to choose the investors who can bring about the most impact to the economic and the environment. We should not choose the investors who pay the highest price. And then we also need a policy to manage the use and the pricing of the land. I think we can properly deal with the pricing by setting the price very close to the market price. We must choose those who participate in the auction and make sure that they have enough finance to follow up with the auction. We can judge this by looking at their bank accounts, and by then we don't need to ask them for collateral properties or assets. The next issue is the land use duration. We all know that land use is limited, And when the land is used in long term or permanently, the real estate became accumulated assets. And that is the reason why land in the central area, the price is so high, and much higher than its benefits, than its interest and profits, because people will buy land as gold, as an accumulated asset, not just a property. So we have to set the proper land use duration. For example, for house, people will renovate and use it for a long time. So by that time, the house is considered accumulated assets. However, the apartments in the buildings is only in a short-term use. So I suggest that we should collect the money annually or during a short term. The third is the added value from land real estate price. So when there is a change in the planning or investment by the government, the owner of the land can benefit from this, and this is one of the reasons for speculation. And one of the methods to reduce speculation is the imposing of very high tax for the discrepancies between the prices. And we also must impose a very high tax on the land when the purpose of the land is changed. And if you don't use the land effectively, then you have to sell it to others who can use it more effectively. If you keep it, then you will have to pay very high tax. The third reason for the added value from land is the change in planning. So we have to be very transparent when it comes to planning, especially the planning on real estate. And the fourth point is that I can see that at the moment we are planning the land for low incomes along with other real estate projects. So it is very difficult for them, for the low incomers, to buy land. So we suggest that we separate this. The final point is that the buying and selling real estate without registration can lead to the loss of tax revenue, and the unregistered buyers and sellers are protected. So I suggest that we implement three solutions. The first one is the registration of land, and transaction of land and real estate is mandatory. So unregistered transaction is not protected by law. And all transactions must be conducted through the exchange. And only through the exchange we can make sure that the price is legal and the information is transparent, and this includes the tax. And we also made clear the responsibilities of the exchange. They must provide reliable information with regards to land registration and market control. And we suggest that the information provided by the exchange can replace the information provided by the notary. And the final point is the sales of future form real estate. I think we are creating favorable favorable conditions for unregistered sellers and buyers. So I suggest that we issue the bonds for those who wish to sell and buy the real estate in the future, and this will also boost the development of the bond and the security market. Thank you very much. Next. Thank you very much, Mr. Ho Ren Kung, Rights Vector of the National Economic University, for providing the information on the land policy and its impact on the real estate market, and also your recommendations for land use change, price management, land use duration. And ladies and gentlemen, the two presentations have covered quite a number of issues in the real estate market. And the land use market is also experiencing a lot of shortages. And next, may I invite Professor Đặng Hùng Võ, former Vice Minister of Natural Resources and Environment, to deliver his presentation. Esteemed leaders of the party and state, the co-chairs,
Hội thảo kính thưa tất cả các quý vị
distinguished delegates,
đại biểu tới dự hội thảo hôm nay. Bài trình bày của tôi thì có mục tiêu là hoàn thiện.
The purpose of my presentations is to further improve the land policies to respond to the new context. My report is rather long, but due to time constraint, only 12 minutes given to each speaker, I would like to make a brief presentation on the main points. First, we can see that the main goal of socio-economic development identified by the 13th National Party Congress is that by 2045, Vietnam will become an industrialized country with high income. This means we have to overcome the middle income trap experiences from other countries. That in order to overcome the middle income trap is extremely difficult. We must have our own solution, because all countries, while pursuing industrialization process, not all of them succeed. So when we look around, only few countries in this region have succeeded. They are the Asian dragons, like Singapore, the ROK, or the Taiwan's economy. Only few of them we can count with our hand. What can we learn from them? There have been various reports compiling all the experiences and come up with different solutions. But what we have learned from this economy is that focus should be given to the development of high-quality human resources, going hand in hand with advanced technologies. This is the only way to elevate our economy, to overcome the middle income trap. Additionally, we have to understand that the role of land. For an economy, if you just look into the profits generated in the economy, for example, from budget revenue, only some small portion is spent for public investment. This is what we've been looking at. Now we understand that PPP is very important. We need to mobilize private investment. All the total investment from both
rất hạn hẹp.
public and
Và
private
từ các
sectors
nước mà đã vượt qua bẫy thu nhập
is
trung
still
bình,
very
thì
limited.
người ta cho rằng
And from
là
the
đất
success
đai
stories of
thì là một
countries
cái
that
nguồn lực tạo ra vốn đầu tư
overcame the middle
rất
income
mạnh.
trap, land can
Và
be
đây
seen
chính là
as a
quá trình
very
người ta gọi là
important
vốn hóa
investment
đất đai.
resources. This
Và
is what
đã
we
có
call
một cái tác
land
phẩm,
capitalization.
nói khác, một cái cuốn sách
There, there's a
nói
book
về khai thác nguồn vốn tiềm
on
ẩn
how
trong đất. Và đấy chính là cái giải pháp
how
để tăng
to
vốn đầu tư
fully utilize
cho
the
các cái quốc gia
potential
đang thực hiện công nghiệp hóa.
capital
Ai mà vốn hóa,
stemming
đất
from
nước
the
nào
land.
mà vốn hóa
The country
được
successful
thì có nghĩa rằng cái quá
and
trình vượt
land
bẫy thu nhập trung bình của
capitalizations
nước đó là chắc
can
chắn.
also
Còn
succeed
nếu
in
chúng ta
overcoming the
không
middle income
khai
trap.
thác được vốn tiềm ẩn
Otherwise,
trong đất thì lúc đó sẽ thấy là phát triển nó rất chật vật.
it's
Ở đây
very
vốn tiềm ẩn
difficult to
trong đất thì
pursue
nó rất đơn giản
development.
thôi. Chúng ta cũng biết rằng
We all
nếu
know
mà
that
đất đai khi
land,
được đầu tư
once
của một cái dự án theo bất kỳ nguồn vốn nào, tư nhân
is
hay là vốn
invested
đối tác
under any
công tư,
project,
hay là
whether if
hay là
under
vốn đầu tư
PPP
công,
or
thì
public
đều
investment,
làm giá trị đất đai của cái
it
khu
helps
vực
to
đầu tư đó tăng lên
increase the
rất nhiều
value
lần. Và
of
chúng ta cũng có thể thấy
the
rằng
area
ngay tại Việt Nam,
around that
khi
landslide.
ở Hà Nội,
In
một cái
Vietnam,
nơi
in
mà
Hanoi,
chúng ta có đầu tư thì chắc chắn là giá
we
đất
can
ở
see
đấy sẽ
that
tăng, thậm chí
when
là
there's a
hàng ngày
project
và
in a
thậm chí
certain
lên cả
area,
hàng
the
trăm
land
lần
price
cho
will
một
increase
cái khu vực nào đó nếu
by
chúng ta biết
hundreds
đầu
of
tư.
times.
Và nếu nhà nước thu được cái
And
giá
if the
trị tăng thêm này,
state
thì tôi cho rằng
can
đấy chính là một
collect
cái điều quan
this
trọng nhất
added
là
value,
chúng ta
then
nhà
it
nước
will
phải
be very
cương quyết
useful, very
thu được giá
important
trị đất đai tăng thêm
to
do quá trình đầu tư
all our
mang
efforts.
lại.
So
Thì
the
đấy
most
chính là
important thing
cái
is how we
cái
can
nhiệm vụ mà
collect
tôi
the
cho rằng
added
các nước
values,
họ
the
vượt bẫy thu nhập
profit
trung bình
from
chẳng
the
qua là
land
họ
that
làm
has
được
the
cái việc đó.
investment projects.
Thế còn ta thì tôi cho rằng hiện nay
For
chúng ta
Vietnam,
để phung phí cái giá
we,
trị
at
đất
this
đai
moment,
tăng thêm rất nhiều.
we still
Hay nói cách khác
waste
là không chui được
this
vào ngân sách
added
nhà nước.
value
Tất
from
cả
the
các
land.
giá trị
We
đất đai
cannot
tăng
collect
thêm thì
them for
đều
the step
nằm
budget
ở khu vực, có khi là nằm tại nhà đầu
because
tư dự án, có khi nằm vào túi của cái người dân
they
đang
will be
sử dụng đất
collected
tại
by
đấy.
the project
Ở Việt Nam
owners.
thì có một cái ví dụ
There's
rất
a
đáng
very
kể, đấy chính là quá trình
notable
đầu tư phát triển
example
thành phố Đà
is
Nẵng.
that the story
Nhưng mà
of
các
Da Nang
địa
City.
phương khác có học được không?
This
Thì
is a
hiện
very
nay chưa
successful
địa phương nào
story,
học
but
cả.
other localities
Thế thì
haven't been
cái
able
cách
to
làm của Đà
learn
Nẵng thì tôi
from
chỉ
their
nói
lesson.
vắn tắt là thế này thôi.
In Da Nang's case,
Đà Nẵng đã xây dựng một cái
Da
trung tâm
Nang
đô thị mới,
developed
trung
a
tâm
new
thành phố mới.
urban
Bỏ, tức
area.
là hãy để dừng lại cái trung tâm cũ và xây dựng cái trung tâm mới.
They will
Là
stop
từ
investment into the
các cái làng
old
chài ven bãi biển
centers,
Khê.
but they
Và,
invested in the
và từ đấy
new
thì đất nông nghiệp với giá
fishing
trị rất
villages
rẻ. Và
along
khi
the
thành trung tâm
Mỹ
của thành phố thì giá nó
beach
lên
because they're
hàng trăm
agricultural
lần.
land.
Thì đấy chính
So
là cái
the
một cái giải
investment
pháp. Cái giải
resources
pháp thứ hai,
required is
tức là
very
phát triển
small.
hạ tầng để từ
And
đó
second,
làm cho giá
then
trị
our
đất đai
focus is
tăng
on the
thêm.
development of the infrastructure in
Mọi
the
người có hỏi là
neighborhood
tại sao
to
các
increase the value of
địa
the land.
phương khác không
Why
hay nói
other
cách khác là chưa học được
provinces
kinh nghiệm của Đà
are
Nẵng?
unable to
Thì
copy
tôi cho
Da
rằng
Nang?
là, điều quan trọng là Đà Nẵng
I think
biết
that
làm được,
Da Nang knows
tính toán được chuyện quy hoạch,
how to
chuyện
do.
phát
Da Nang
triển
is
sáng tạo
able
Việt.
to
Nhưng đồng thời Đà Nẵng
have a
nắm
very
được
good
người dân
planning,
rất tốt.
and
Và
they
quá trình
understand
vận động người dân tham gia cùng
the
chính quyền
people
để phát triển.
have
Thì
been
đấy
able to
chính là cái
mobilize
quan trọng nhất.
the engagement,
Mà nếu
the
chúng ta
support
không
from the people.
chính quyền không nắm được người dân,
So the
làm
lesson
cho người dân
here is
không
that
đồng
if
hành
the
với
local
mình được, thì
authorities
đấy chính là cái
cannot
khó
have the
khăn.
support of the people, they can
Cái mà
never be
tạo ra những
successful.
phát triển nó
This helps to
không-
create the
không hiệu quả.
breakthroughs.
Ở
For Đà
đây
Nẵng,
thì những vấn đề mà cần hoàn chỉnh trong chính sách đất đai thì có
what
rất nhiều.
we need to further
nhưng mà
improve
đây tôi
in
muốn
the
nói
land-related
Cái
policies,
điểm thứ nhất
there will be
là
many. But first of all,
chúng ta thì vẫn quen với tư duy bao cấp, hay nói cách khác là quen
we
với
are so
công cụ
used
chính.
to the subsidy,
Và cái đấy nó tồn
way
tại
of
trong
thinking,
đầu mỗi một người mà nhiều
the
khi chúng ta
administrative
không hình dung nổi.
tools. It's
Nhưng mà
already
sự
in
thật
our
nó
mindset.
đang chi phối
It has affected our way of thinking, our way of doing. So at the Resolution 18 of the Central Party, we have to commercialize the land use rights. This is a very precise, straightforward policy. But however, in the implementation process, we have to set aside the subsidy approach. We cannot remove it. We can abolish it, but the administrative tools can still be acceptable within some certain scope of applications. It cannot be used widely. In any case, we have to respect the market tools. This will help to create sustainable development and at the same time to be able to effectively capitalize the land resources. How to have a market approach thinking, we all have to look into it carefully. We have to find a solution, a way, rather than resort to the applications of the administrative tools. We have to be able to remove all the obstacles between the state and the people in the enforcement of all the law. So the key point is our way of thinking, the way that we think. So when we have to choose whether to apply the old thinking of subsidy to the new approach, this is very important in the process of perfecting the land-related policies. We have to decide to use the market tools rather than the administrative tools if we want to achieve our set targets. In the amended land law, the Decree 18 also points out a lot of issues we have to focus on. But I would like to pick only two of them that we need thorough, comprehensive solutions. The first one is the price of the market value of the land. There's still a lot of debates that there's no market value of land. Even in various forums, we have touched upon this topic. It is true that there should not be a misunderstanding between the market value of the land with the value of each specific transaction. Because for each specific transaction, the number is quite different from transaction to transaction, from the location to location. So many people use these data. It's important to calculate the market value of land. But we have to understand that the market value of land is the result of the estimations of the market values. So this can be called a statistical estimation problem. We have to estimate the value based on the compilations of all the statistics of each specific transaction. So there will be no one single data for the market value. This is the estimation problem. So which state agency is be in charge of calculating this market value? We have to take into consideration the credibility, the reliability of the value, whether if it's 90% or 0.% accurate. I want to raise this problem so that we can change our approach towards the market value. We have to understand that this is a statistical estimation. Only if we can understand that, we can
Bởi vì cái điều này nó
clearly
liên quan đến tất
decide
cả
the
mọi
market
việc
value of land because
điều
it's closely
phối về giá
related
trị đất đai
to
trên
all
thị trường.
the
Chúng ta
management
vốn hóa có thành công
of
hay không
the
thì
market
cũng chính
value
là
as well
chúng
as
ta có
the
hiểu giá trị đất đai trên thị trường
capitalizations.
hay không. Chúng ta hiểu đúng thì mọi việc nó sẽ
Without
đúng. Còn
understanding
chúng ta hiểu
will lead
không
to
đúng
sound
thì mọi việc nó
implementation.
sẽ sai. Cái câu chuyện thứ hai là
And
câu chuyện
second,
chuyển dịch đất
it's
đai.
about land
Cái
conversion.
mà giáo sư Cường vừa rồi bàn cũng hơi nhiều.
Professor
Thực ra
Cường
tôi chỉ
has
nói là
touched
cái này
upon
thôi. Tức
this
là chúng
issue.
ta thì vẫn cứ đi vào
So I
hai
just
cái
want to
trạng thái
emphasize
cực
that
đoan
there are
của vấn đề
two
chuyển dịch đất đai.
extremist
Một là chuyển dịch đất đai bắt buộc là nhà nước
approach,
đứng ra quyết định.
whether it is
Cái thứ hai
compulsory
là chuyển dịch
land
đất đai tự
conversions
nguyện.
or voluntary
Tức là mọi người,
land conversions.
giao
The first
dịch,
one is decided by the
mọi người
state,
thỏa thuận với nhau
and the
theo cơ
second
chế
one
thị trường.
will be
Thì tất
discussed
cả những cái đấy
by all the
là nó tạo
stakeholders
thành hai
based
trạng thái
on the
cực
market
đoan.
values.
Mà hai
And
trạng
it
thái
will
cực
create
đoan này
two
đều không có lợi.
opposite
Khi mà chúng ta cho
ends,
nhà
and
nước
this is
bắt
not
buộc theo quyết định hành chính thì chắc chắn
good
là khiếu kiện của người
at
dân
all,
sẽ nhiều.
because
Còn nếu
once
mà
the land is
sử dụng cơ chế thị
converted,
trường thuần túy,
land conversion is compulsory, there will be a lot of complaints by the people. And for voluntary land conversions, then it is impossible for the investors to reach the final agreements because there are still a certain percentage of the landowners do not compromise. In Vietnam at this moment, there are only two scenarios, whether if administrative measures or market measures. But in the world, there's another alternate solution, which is land conversion with social agreement. Social agreement can be understood that all the landowners related to the project, they can provide, they can have different compromises. But it can be understood that the majority of the landowners can't come up with a social agreement. These methods are called land pooling, adjustment. The most important, we have to take into consideration those who disagree, whether if because they have to suffer a lot of losses. So we have to take into considerations of these people. We have to take into the aftermath of the land conversion by the state in order to have to understand all the thinking or the pointers of the people. Due to time constraint, I would like to end my presentation here, and I hope that with the amendment of the land law this time, it will create a new driver for the socio-economic development of Vietnam. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Đặng Hùng Võ. Ladies and gentlemen, within a very short time this morning, we have listened to 3 presentations by our specialists, and they have opened up a lot of useful policies. Now, may I express our very sincere thanks to all our specialists, our panelists, and may I invite you all to a 15-minute break, and then we will move to the roundtable discussion.
Nói mà. Được chưa? Có phải nói không anh ơi?
Đây thôi. Chỉ cần đây thôi, con này ống ấy.
Tí thôi, cái này là được rồi.
Gần
chéo mà.
gần quá là nó mic mày hết pin rồi này, lại kia tháo cái ấy cho còn có 2 vạch.
Vạch tay thoải mái.
Quay máy lại. Cho MC lên hình.
Đạo diễn nào ấy?
Đạo diễn Quang Sĩ. Lâm Quang Sĩ. Anh em thông cả.
Rồi bí bách à?
Lùi lại. Lùi lại thì nữa.
Nghe nhạc hiệu biết từng chỉnh.
Chọn chưa? Chọn đi, chọn đây à?
Ở đây luôn à anh? Ở đây luôn à? Ở đây luôn à?
Không, cân chọn này, đang cân.
Alo, có phải thử tiếng nữa không anh ơi? Hay cho ngồi đây luôn đi anh?
Bách ở sau gì?
Đứng à? Alo?
Vâng, chị ở dưới tầng 1 đúng không ạ?
Mình vẫn ở trong phòng khánh tiết ấy.
Dạ vâng.
Tại Trung tâm Hội nghị Quốc gia, thủ đô Hà Nội, nơi đã chính thức tổ chức Diễn đàn Kinh tế Xã hội Việt Nam VSEP 2022. Và tại sáng ngày hôm nay, tại phòng khánh tiết này, thì Chủ tịch Quốc hội Vương Đình Huệ đã phát biểu chỉ đạo phiên khai mạc. Và sau đó thì các đại biểu, các chuyên gia, các nhà khoa học thì đã chia về các phòng chuyên đề để thảo luận những vấn đề nóng của nền kinh tế. Trong đó thì chuyên đề 2 về thúc đẩy việc thực hiện các chính sách hỗ trợ doanh nghiệp và người lao động, cũng như tạo động lực phục hồi sản xuất kinh doanh và phát triển bền vững. Và ngay bây giờ bên cạnh tôi đang là thầy Nguyễn Trúc Lê, hiệu trưởng trường Đại học Kinh tế, Đại học Quốc gia thành phố Hà Nội ạ. Và thầy Trúc Lê cũng là người đã phát biểu đầu tiên trong phiên chuyên đề 2. Và xin được cảm ơn thầy đã dành thời gian với chương trình của chúng tôi ngày hôm nay ạ. Vâng ạ. Và được biết là sau khi Diễn đàn Kinh tế 2021, thầy Trúc Lê cũng là một trong những người tham gia trực tiếp tại diễn đàn. Và sau đó thì Quốc hội và Chính phủ cũng đã ban hành các chính sách hỗ trợ doanh nghiệp cũng như là hỗ trợ người dân và hộ kinh doanh phục hồi sản xuất kinh doanh. Vậy thì thầy Trúc Lê có thể đánh giá như thế nào về những cái hiệu quả chính sách này ạ?
Nhóm nghiên cứu của chúng tôi sau khi nghiên cứu phỏng vấn các doanh nghiệp thì đánh giá nhóm chính sách này rất là tốt, đã tác động ngay trực tiếp phục hồi nền kinh tế của chúng ta và đặc biệt là tạo niềm tin cho doanh nghiệp và người dân. Đây là cái điều mà chúng tôi nhìn nhận và đánh giá rất là cao. Cái điều thứ hai là góp phần vào phục hồi kinh tế, bình ổn lãi suất, gia tăng các hoạt động liên quan đến hỗ trợ cho doanh nghiệp tiếp cận vấn đề về các loại hình thuế được giảm để miễn thuế, rồi gia hạn thuế như là miễn thuế bảo vệ môi trường, giảm thuế bảo vệ môi trường, miễn thuế tiền gia hạn đất, rồi các loại hình thuế như thuế giá trị gia tăng. Thì chính sách tài khóa là một trong những vấn đề mà chúng tôi đánh giá rất là cao trong cái chính sách vừa rồi, bởi vì nó đã tác động trực tiếp cho doanh nghiệp và doanh nghiệp cảm thấy được bình ổn để phát triển. Ngoài ra thì chúng tôi thấy rằng ngoài những cái chính sách đấy thì về cơ bản là chúng ta cũng đã ổn định so với các nước trong khu vực. Thì đây là một cái niềm tin của người dân vô cùng lớn khi mà chúng ta đang đẩy mạnh các hoạt động về kinh doanh xuất nhập khẩu của các doanh nghiệp.
Tuy nhiên thì tôi cũng có theo dõi cái chuyên đề của đại biểu ngồi cũng như là những cái bài nghiên cứu phát biểu của trường Đại học Kinh tế, thì có được biết rằng là một trong những cái tồn tại khó khăn mà nhóm nghiên cứu chỉ ra khi mà chính sách tốt nhưng doanh nghiệp và người dân hiện nay thì vẫn chưa có thể nói là tiếp cận với chính sách chưa được nhiều, nhất là có những cái chính sách như là về hỗ trợ cấp bù lãi suất này cũng triển khai cũng mới đây thôi. Vậy thì cái bài phát biểu của mình ngày hôm nay thì thầy Trúc Lê có thể chia sẻ lại một chút thông tin và vì sao lại có cái thông tin?
Thực ra là khi rà soát và phỏng vấn cũng như là các doanh nghiệp và một số nhóm đối tượng doanh nghiệp cụ thể thì đặc biệt là đối với cả những cái lĩnh vực như là logistics, du lịch dịch vụ, kế toán, kiểm toán, tài chính ngân hàng và một số các công ty khác thì chúng tôi nhìn nhận thấy rằng là đầu tiên thì là các báo cáo về số liệu của chúng ta là có, nhưng mà các thông tin cũng như là cái cách thức mà để tiếp cận phối hợp với nhau để làm sao triển khai đưa ra những cái quyết định kịp thời là chưa có. Vì vậy là chúng ta cũng phải sớm là đánh giá giữa kỳ cái chính sách này để làm sao chúng ta có đầy đủ các thông tin trước để tiếp tục triển khai thời gian còn lại của cái chính sách, làm tối ưu hóa hiệu quả chính sách. Cái điểm thứ hai nữa của chúng tôi đó là chúng ta cần rà soát lại các tiêu chí của các doanh nghiệp để làm sao được cái chính sách nó đến được với cả từng cái doanh nghiệp, dành cho những cái nhóm đối tượng nó phù hợp. Trong đó là đặc biệt là chúng ta cũng phải lưu ý đến những cái nhóm doanh nghiệp mà là cái bệ đỡ của kinh tế, như chẳng hạn như là những ngành công nghiệp phụ trợ, công nghệ cao, rồi logistics, rồi dịch vụ. Cái điểm thứ ba nữa là chúng tôi có là cần phải các chính sách thì khi chúng tôi nhìn thấy là cần phải làm rõ được các mục tiêu một cách nó cụ thể hơn, và cái mục tiêu đấy nó được phổ biến được đến các doanh nghiệp một cách nó dễ dàng hơn. Tôi nghĩ rằng là sau khi phỏng vấn thì các doanh nghiệp lớn thì họ tiếp cận được những cái mục tiêu, những cái chính sách nó rất là dễ, nhưng đối với doanh nghiệp vừa và nhỏ thì có lẽ được rằng là họ đang chưa tiếp cận đầy đủ thông tin, đặc biệt là ở tại các địa phương. Và cái điểm cuối cùng ấy, thì nhóm nghiên cứu của trường Đại học Kinh tế của chúng tôi cho rằng cái việc giảm thuế là vô cùng quan trọng trong thời gian ngắn hạn, nhưng trong dài hạn thì chúng ta cũng cân nhắc trong cái vấn đề gọi là gia hạn, hoãn cái thuế này, đặc biệt là đối với những cái thuế như là thuế tiêu thụ đặc biệt thì tại thời điểm chúng ta là sẽ giảm rồi, và tôi nghĩ trong thời gian ngắn hạn sắp tới nữa thì chúng ta sẽ giảm tiếp, hay là thuế giá trị gia tăng, rồi các loại hình thuế khác. Nhưng mà tính đến dài hạn thì chúng ta cũng phải tính đến có thể là hoãn trong một tương lai dài.
Nói như vậy thì phải chăng là các chính sách, các tiêu chí hiện nay mục tiêu hướng đến thì mới chỉ hướng đến những cái doanh nghiệp khỏe, còn những cái doanh nghiệp yếu họ mới là những người cần, những đơn vị, những cái đối tượng cần phải có cái phao chính sách được cứu trợ.
Chính sách là đã hướng đến đầy đủ các doanh nghiệp, nhưng mà có lẽ là cái thông tin cũng như là cái hướng dẫn văn bản nó đang chưa được đầy đủ, và là mỗi một địa phương thì nó có những cái cách, có thể có những cách triển khai nó khác nhau, cho nên là các hoạt động của các doanh nghiệp vừa và nhỏ họ khó tiếp cận hơn doanh nghiệp lớn, và chính vì thế là còn có cái độ trễ của văn bản nữa, thì các doanh nghiệp vừa và nhỏ bị ảnh hưởng nhiều nhất. Và sau khi chúng tôi phỏng vấn thì chúng tôi thấy cái điều mà cần phải làm rõ các văn bản hướng dẫn một cách nó tổng thể và phối hợp cùng nhau giữa các địa phương và bộ ban ngành một cách chuẩn chỉnh hơn và nhanh hơn, phù hợp và kịp thời hơn.
Một câu hỏi ngắn gọn nữa thôi là sau diễn đàn ngày hôm nay với những cái khó khăn tồn tại mà nhóm nghiên cứu đã chỉ ra, thì từ phía trường Đại học Kinh tế có mong muốn để đề xuất gì để chúng ta tháo gỡ khó khăn về chính sách để cho doanh nghiệp và người dân và hộ kinh doanh có thể tiếp cận chính sách dễ dàng hơn và phục hồi bền vững đúng như cái tiêu chí, cái mục tiêu và chủ đề của diễn đàn ngày hôm nay ạ?
Trước tiên thì tôi nghĩ là chúng ta sẽ sớm có những cái cơ chế phối hợp triển khai đồng bộ từ trung ương cho đến địa phương. Thì cái này thì tôi nghĩ là chúng ta sẽ mất khoảng tầm 1 đến 2 tháng để sớm ban hành ra những cái văn bản hướng dẫn cho từng các chính sách, đặc biệt là liên quan đến các loại hình hỗ trợ trực tiếp. Thứ hai nữa là tôi nghĩ rằng là chúng ta cũng phải rà soát lại các tiêu chí đánh giá các doanh nghiệp để nhằm đảm bảo sự hài hòa phù hợp. Chẳng hạn như là khi đi khảo sát một số các doanh nghiệp dịch vụ thì họ vẫn luôn luôn kêu là cái khả năng tiếp cận hỗ trợ của họ so với cả các doanh nghiệp khác nằm trong các ngành nghề khác là ít hơn. Thế thì đây cũng là lúc mà chúng ta đang thay cái đà phục hồi kinh tế. Vừa rồi du lịch của chúng ta cũng phát triển tăng rất là mạnh. Thì nếu như chúng ta chỉ cần đẩy một chút cái cơ chế chính sách vào cho những cái nhóm đối tượng này thì chúng ta tiếp tục giữ vững được cái nền tảng về các hoạt động dịch vụ kinh doanh đối với các doanh nghiệp lớn cũng như là nhỏ. Thì đây cũng là một cái điều mà chúng ta cần phải xem xét và điều chỉnh. Trong tương lai dài hạn thì chúng ta cũng nên cân nhắc tính toán đến cái việc là khi các nhóm doanh nghiệp mà phát triển ở một cái thời gian dài thì cái khả năng chống chịu của doanh nghiệp là vô cùng quan trọng. Những doanh nghiệp nào thực sự mà khả năng chống chịu kém chúng ta cũng phải cân nhắc. Chứ còn tôi nghĩ được rằng là chúng ta nên tập trung đẩy mạnh những nhóm mà có khả năng chống chịu vừa rồi đang vượt qua đại dịch và tiếp tục đẩy cho lên tiếp. Thì đây là một trong những cái điểm mà chúng tôi cũng có khuyến nghị trong cái diễn đàn kinh tế xã hội của Quốc hội.
Đúng như là cái tiêu chí là phát triển bền vững và phải tiếp tục thúc đẩy nuôi dưỡng cho doanh nghiệp có thể phát triển, nhất là những doanh nghiệp khỏe để họ có thể chống chịu và có thể mang lại một cái nguồn thu ngân sách sau đó, đúng không ạ? Vâng, cảm ơn thầy Nguyễn Trúc Lê ạ. Vâng, thưa quý vị, vừa rồi là những chia sẻ nhanh và ngắn gọn của thầy Trúc Lê, Đại học Kinh tế, Đại học Quốc gia Hà Nội, và chương trình của chúng tôi thì sẽ được tiếp tục các phiên chuyên đề và được phát trực tiếp trên nền tảng số của Truyền hình Quốc hội Việt Nam. Bên cạnh đó thì chúng tôi cũng sẽ có tiếp tục sẽ có những phỏng vấn với những chuyên gia khác. Mời quý vị tiếp tục theo dõi ạ.
Alo, ban tổ chức xin kính mời quý vị đại biểu khẩn trương vào khán phòng để ta tiếp tục chương trình của hội thảo bàn tròn. Vâng, xin kính thưa các đồng chí chủ trì và các quý vị đại biểu. Tiếp theo chương trình hội thảo, ban tổ chức xin mời quý vị đại biểu cùng trao đổi, thảo luận các nội dung với chủ đề là đẩy mạnh cải cách thể chế, hoàn thiện chính sách về đất đai, giải pháp quan trọng về phục hồi, phát triển kinh tế xã hội. Và ban tổ chức xin trân trọng giới thiệu và kính mời đại biểu tham gia thảo luận bàn tròn. Xin trân trọng giới thiệu và kính mời đồng chí Hồ Đức Phước, Ủy viên Ban chấp hành Trung Đảng,
Co-chairs, Mr. Hồ Đức Phước, Minister
xin trân
of
trọng kính mời
Finance,
đồng chí Trần Hồng Hà, Ủy viên Ban chấp hành Trung Đảng, Bộ trưởng Bộ Tài nguyên Môi trường.
Member of the Party Central Committee, Minister
kính
of
mời ông Nguyễn Văn
Natural
Sinh,
Resources
Thứ trưởng
and
Bộ Xây dựng.
Environment, Mr.
kính
Nguyễn
mời
Văn
giáo sư
Sinh, Vice Minister of
Phan Văn
Construction,
Cường,
Professor Hoàng Văn Cường,
Phó Hiệu trưởng
Vice
trường
Rector
Đại học Kinh tế
of
Quốc dân.
National Economic
Và xin kính mời giáo sư
University,
tiến sĩ Đặng Hùng Võ, nguyên Thứ trưởng Bộ
Professor
Tài nguyên
Đặng
Môi
Hùng
trường.
Võ, former
Và
Vice Minister of
kính
Natural
mời ông
Resources and
Andrew
Environment,
Jeffrey,
Mr. Andrew
Giám đốc Quốc gia
Jeffries,
Ngân hàng Châu Á tại Việt Nam.
Director
Và xin
of
kính mời tiến sĩ
ADB
Nguyễn Đình
Vietnam,
Cung, nguyên Viện trưởng Viện Quản lý
Dr.
Kinh tế
Nguyễn
Trung
Đình
ương.
Cung, former
Và xin kính
President
mời ông
of
Lê
CM,
Hoàng Châu, Chủ
Mr.
tịch Hiệp
Lê
hội Bất
Hoàng
động sản
Châu,
Thành phố Hồ Chí Minh.
President of Ho Chi Minh City
Và trân
Real
trọng kính
Estate
mời
Association,
tiến sĩ Phan Đức Hiếu, Ủy viên Thường trực Ủy ban Kinh tế
Dr.
của Quốc
Phan
hội,
Đức Hiếu,
chuyên gia điều phối phiên thảo
standing
luận. Xin kính
member
mời các
of
quý vị
the
đại biểu
National
khách
Assembly's
quý lên tham dự cái phiên thảo
Committee
luận
for
bàn tròn. Xin kính mời.
Economic Affairs, our moderator today. May I invite our panelists on stage? Ladies and gentlemen, representative of leadership from central committees, localities, scientists and experts. Now I would like to moderate our discussion on stepping up institutional reforms and improving land-related policies. I will not repeat our list of panelists. As we all know, in the previous session, we have listened to 3 presentations on the outcomes of institutional reform, and some of our speakers have put forward very specific solutions for land law. And in this session, we will continue our in-depth discussion on reform of land law and the improvement of and the revision of the land law. And we see that in this session we have representatives from the scientists, the business community, the authorities, and ADB, an international organization. And to start, may I raise the first question to the Minister of Natural Resources and Environment. At the moment, the government is urgently revising the law on land, and this is the law that is expected to provide a mechanism and framework to upgrade the efficiency of land use and to promote people's living standards. So the ministry, as the advisory body in drafting and revising the law, could you I think the revision a lot, but can you please brief us on the 3 main elements that are considered to be the breakthroughs in this revised law that will bring positive impacts to people's life? Leaders of the state and the party, Vietnamese and international guests, and I highly appreciate and listen very attentively to the 3 presentations in the previous session. And our speakers have covered many theoretical and practical matters to the revision of the land law. If you ask me personally, what are the 3 takeaways for me? Well, it is a very difficult question because you know that the Resolution 18 has put forward 11 core elements, and all of them are very important. But for me, I will look at the most important toolkit for administration of land. So the first one is the planning. We must reform our way of planning and the role of planning so that planning can really demonstrate the authority and the power of the government of the state in managing these very precious resources. It must make sure equal treatment among stakeholders, among generations, and it must deal with the need for land use in the past, at present, and in the future. And it must ensure democracy and all stakeholders must participate in this process. The second important element, as I have listened to our speakers, is about the valuation of the land. And I think there is a big gap between the theoretical and the practice of the valuation of land. And if this is carried out in a transparent manner, then we will be able to solve the relationship between those who have the land and those whose lands are revoked. So the pricing of land is very important. The financial issues related to the land must be addressed using economic tools and taking into account the social impacts of these tools. And there must be a combination of economic and administrative tools. Only by this can we avoid the speculation, the overpricing, and the wastefulness in land use. So that's the second element. And the third takeaway for me is we are managing a huge resources, but it seems that we do not have information about these resources, and there is a lack of management, of supervision, of data, and we must promote digital transformation in this sector. Only then can we exercise the power of the state to manage these resources properly. Through the data, we can manage and can supervise these resources. We can provide our people with transparent information, and we can also promote administrative reform in this sector so that the state can really become the server of the people, not someone who makes it difficult for the people. And for other 8 issues that have been covered by the resolution, you can learn more about this through the documents. So I understand that all the issues mentioned by the resolutions are important, and within the time constraint, you already mentioned the 3 elements that you think are the most important to you and to the socio-economic development. And joining our discussion today, we also have the Minister of Finance. And so the Minister of Natural Resources has already mentioned the land finance. So can you, as the Minister of Finance, share with us that with regards to the revision of the land law and the land finance policy, what fundamental changes do you think should be made?
Mr. Nguyễn Thắng, Mr. Trần Thanh Mẫn. I see that Resolution 18 of the Central Committee is the guiding line for the orientation for the law building and issuance of the legal documents in the time to come. So 3 issues related to land policies. The first one is the conversions of the purpose of use. This is a big loophole that the law 2013 has not yet touched upon. It has created a great loss and also leads to some violations. Therefore, we have to manage the management of the purpose of land use must be very strict. I agree with Mr. Kuang that it's your land, but it is used for rental purposes. But once you do not have, you do not use that. You do no longer have that need that it will be reclaimed by the state. This will generate the resources for economic development. For example, for businesses, after the equitization process, non-state businesses, when they look into the golden land locations, the lands will be converted into commercial purposes or for housing. This will create the losses for the state or for the owners. With just one administrative decisions, we can lose thousands or hundreds of thousands of billion Vietnamese dong. So we have to take it. And second, regarding the price, the method to calculate the price, there are 5 different methods, but all these methods are not yet consistent and accurate, also lead to the loopholes. For example, when we convert the purpose of the land, we use the surplus method, but we can never have accurate number using this method because the value of the revenues and the investments or the assumptions, they're not correct, and it might lead to legal risk as well as the risk for the businesses and for the state agencies. How to identify the revenue? We have to calculate the revenue per 1 square meters. But for the high building, we calculate that the price is 30 million per square meters, but another investigation team, once they estimate the price to be 35 square meters. For the quarter, for the cap, it is all applied to the assumptions of the price, the estimations of the price. We also have to add all the additional fees. So we can see that for all the violations of the regulations, they will be handled using the criminal code. So this is what I think that in the time to come, we have to review all the prices of the land in order to come up with one single, consistent, most efficient method, for example, comparison based on scientific grounds or the variable or the specific statistics. So when there's changes variables, we can use this method as well as the specific regulations for each specific construction work or building. So we can come up with consistent and efficient method. The surplus method is not much different from the way that we calculate the VAT. About the handover of the land, we see it as when we collect the tax. By the time we identify the price, and it's when we hand over the land. But I want the new regulations that the timing for the time when we hand over the land and the times we come up with the estimations of the price is no longer than 6 months. In exchange of the land, we have been able to collect the revenue. For example, if we send a house, we do not collect the money, and a few months later, they sell it to the third party. So it will be very complicated. And this is quite popular at this moment, especially at the new urban areas that we haven't been able to address. There are two ways that handover of the land based on bidding and handover the land based on the appointment. The bidding for the constructions of all the complex, then once the price of the land goes down, then all the revenues or the spending fees will be no doubt, so it will increase the competitiveness. For the case of Fuguo, if we can reduce the price, initially the land price, then we won't be able to compete with Thailand. And for example, for economic zone, the fee will be exempted for 11 years. For the areas in the needy areas, will be 15 years, but they should be institutionalized. Thank you very much, ministers. Related to the land-related finance, there are three issues that we have to tackle in the time to come. And especially, he emphasized the need to have a suitable and most consistent method. He also touched upon the risk during the enforcement. But with us, we also have the representative of the Ministry of Construction. It is tasked with drafting the law on real estate business and the law on housing. The two laws are closely related to the land policy. With us this morning, we have the Deputy Minister Nguyễn Văn Sinh. I would like to ask you a question. From the point of view of the Minister of Construction, providing the consultation to the government on drafting the law on real estate business, could you please share one component that we need with the message that you would like to send to the forums on the fundamental components of these two lands that will help to further promote business activities and to meet with the demand for the middle-income people and the workers. And I would like to a gentle reminder that all the interventions should be less than 7 minutes. Esteemed leaders of the party and state of the National Assembly, distinguished delegates, recently the Ministry of Construction is assigned by the government to draft the law on housing and the law on real estate business. During the this process to submit to the National Assembly. With these two laws, the law on housing, we recommend 8 groups of policies, and real estate business, there will be 4 groups of policies. All of them are closely related to the activities in concerning housing and real estate business. For housing, throughout the drafting process, we would like to highlight a few issues that we pay special attention to that need revision in the time to come. First, about the land fund reserved for the development of the houses and the urban area. In this draft, we've made the recommendations towards ensuring the fund, the land fund, that's compatible with the construction urban planning. And second, one of our focus is the land fund reserved for social housings for low-income people. So In recent times, the law on housing has the provisions on reserving the land fund for the development of the urban areas. And it will be handled to the owners, the investors of all the projects, that they have to spend 20% of the land of the area for housing, for social houses. If we spend just 20% of the land fund from the third-grade urban areas, then that will be very limited for social houses, especially in areas like the industrial parks or the areas that concentrate a lot of workers and low-income people. So in this draft, the investment for the social housings, for the workers, for the low incomes, is one of the focus of the party and state, especially for poor people, for the armed forces servicemen. Therefore, we've made a recommendation that the planning for the land fund will be handed over to the Provincial People's Committee, that in any real estate planning, they will have to reserve a certain percentage of the land fund for social houses. And second, land handover, the selection of the investors. I fully agree with the presentations made by Professor Hoàng Văn Cường that the handover of the land and the selections of investors for commercial complex urban areas are very important according to the existing law. Land handover and selections of investors are based on bidding, the use rights. And second is the contract for the use, and three is the appointment of investors for legal land lots. We have been carefully studying this issue in order to remove all the obstacles, for example, for the land that the investors has the use rights that are compatible to the urban planning, whether or not if we can apply investors appointment scheme. The Ho Chi Minh Real Estate Associations has many times requested the government on this issue, made the proposal to the government on these issues, and the price has to reflect the market and in line with the land law. So this is under consideration. So in the time to come, we will come up with concrete recommendations. If we succeed, we will generate the great resources for ensuring the social houses for the people. And third, the policies concerning the land, which is the business activities related to the right to use the land with infrastructure work. At this moment, there are transactions on the land with construction works and infrastructure work.
Thank you very much, Vice Minister Singh. You mentioned three issues. The first one is the land reserve for social housing and low-incomers. The second is the allocation of land to investors so they can implement the projects. The third, as mentioned by Vice Minister Singh, and these three issues are very much relevant to the land law not just the housing law or other law. It must be covered by the land law, not just the real estate law or housing law. And it requires the Ministry of Constructions to work with Monterey in this regard as you revise the law. And in our discussion today, we have Mr. Nguyễn Đình Cung. He is a very drastic institutional reformer who has advised the state on many successful reform programs and contributing to the business and economic development. And may I have a question for Mr. Cung? As a specialist, what do you think of the institutional reform over the past years? Can you raise one good outcomes and one area that you are not happy with? And what recommendations do you have for the future at the macro level and with regards to the improvement of land law? Leaders at the central and provincial level, I think this question is very open, and each panelist will have different assessment. But as for myself, I think the greatest success of the institutional reform is the law on business and the freedom to conduct business. We have ensured the right and the safety of those who wish to operate the business. So from the list of prohibited, so at the moment, the people are free to operate business in all areas except those that are prohibited by the law. And the list of conditional business is shorter, and we can see that we are taking a negative list approach, and the freedom of the business community is greater, and they enjoy greater safety when it comes to business. I think that is one of our biggest success in institutional reform. However, one thing that we haven't been able to succeed is the constant change, the unpredictability, and the uncertainty in enforcement by regulators, and also the observation of the law by the people and the business. So it is so when the investors they feel uncertainty, they are not likely to invest in long-term business, and they would not want to invest a lot of money. And this stemmed from our law, our legal framework. The law in Vietnam is not many, while the circulars, the instructions is many. And the law is short, while the guiding documents are very long. The law is changed, but the decree or the circular are not changed. So they fail to translate the law into reality. And for the people and the business community, what governs them the most is the circulars. And there is constant change in the enforcement of the law, and that is the reality. and it poses a lot of risk to the people and the business. And that is the uncertainty that we are all experiencing at the moment. And how to deal with this uncertainty? It is very difficult. So, the first thing is that the circular, we should not have the circulars anymore in the future. The second, the regulations of the law, if there is an article on the role of the government in guiding the implementation of the law, then we should be very clear. And the third is the quality of the law. So these are the three recommendations. But I must say that institutional reform is super difficult, and we need more discussion to have a consensus. And I cannot answer all of this within the 7 minutes. Thank you very much, Mr. Cung. And I can see that you have very objective assessment on our institutional reform and the recommendations for the future, and how to better translate the law into reality. And joining us today, we also have Mr. Lê Hoàng Châu. He is known as a businessman. He is also a he is also one person who regularly voices his opinions, and as a representative of the business community, what are your expectations for the revised land law and also other relevant laws such as the law on housing or law on real estate? So what are your expectations? You also have 7 minutes. Leaders of the party, state, National Assembly, central and localities. May I ask for 1 more minute? I can see that our theme today is which is the institutional reform. It is the biggest, it's the most important solutions with the most effectiveness and cost the least. So I believe that only the law can create equality among people and a transparent business environment. Indeed, we expect a lot. And we can see the efforts made by the compilation board. The revised land law mentioned the relocation. So, in the revised land law, we said that the relocation must ensure that it is equal or better to the current status. And I suggest that we stick to the better, not just the equal. And I strongly agree with the Minister of Finance that, please, the valuation of the land tasks the Ministry of Finance, not the Ministry of Natural Resources and Environment. Because Mr. Phước, the Minister of Finance, understands this very well. And because we consider institutional reform as one of the 3 breakthroughs. And this has been identified in many of the resolutions. Over the last 3 terms, And we highly appreciate this. And the recent practice in lawmaking by the National Assembly, we highly appreciate that. The way that you talk to the deputies, to the people, you listen to us before you make the law. And Vietnamese investors or foreign investors, we only want equality and fairness. We don't need bias. And at the moment, we need to focus on the implementation of Resolution 18 because it has set out specific goals that the land law must be revised to ensure the consistency and the uniformity in the system. Well, I have learned by heart this resolution. And if we talking about consistency, I don't think we have achieved that so far. There is still a lot of conflict as we enforce our laws. I commend the National Assembly's Committee for Judicial Affairs for submitting a proposal to the National Assembly on anti-corruption. And never before I have seen this. And it is great that you make this decision. And we highly appreciate this effort. And as we learn about the law, there are 5 issues that we are still wondering. First one is we need to add to the law that the business can deal with land owners. And there are 2 approaches mentioned by the Resolution 18. One is auction, the other is the voluntary deal among the sellers and the buyers. And the law seems to not cover this. Only one method is mentioned. And the second is please do not limit the ownership of apartments. So at the moment, there are 2 suggestions. One is unlimited and one is limited. But you are now going for the limited apartment ownership. Meanwhile, the apartment is a big asset to the people. So I suggest that please, the Ministry of Construction, listen to us and please do not limit the ownership of apartment. And in Vietnam, there are 2 ownership of house. One is permanent, and the other is time limited. And the final suggestion is the transaction of real estate through the exchange. And this has to do with the real estate law. I think the land law should only regulate that the transaction of land use should be in accordance with the law, and that is enough. You should not say specifically that it must be conducted through the exchange. We highly appreciate the Resolution 42 by the National Assembly with regards to the delivery of the land. There are so many recommendations I wish to make, but thank you very much, Mr. Cho. Please give me just one final sentence. Please, just one more minute. As you know, the way we make the law, please listen to us, the deputies. You only provide the framework as you make the law. There are 20 articles that you assign to the government. If you go into details, then it's very difficult. Thank you very much, Mr. Cho, for your very straightforward recommendations that covers a lot of areas and very practical. And joining us today, we also have the Mr. Andrew Jeffries, from Director of ADB Vietnam. And I understand that ADB has a lot of experience in practice in Vietnam. And do you have any comments on the institutional reform in Vietnam? And do you have any recommendations? And I can see that a lot of us already mentioned the land law. The Minister of Natural Resources was very brief. So I think you can add your comments if you wish to. And now, please, Mr. Andrew.
Xin cảm ơn.
Members of the National Assembly and Your Excellency ministers and all officials, I'm delighted to be here today on behalf of the Asian Development Bank. We've been involved in working with the government of Vietnam on a number of reform agendas over the last 30 years. And as a multilateral development bank, our shareholders are our member countries. So Vietnam is a part owner of the ADB. The governor of the State Bank of Vietnam sits on the board of governors of the ADB. And so our role is to provide the best objective information and advice on matters requested of us by the government. Reforms in general need to come from and be driven from within a government. Our role is then just, to support those efforts. One particular benefit that an organization like ourselves can provide is that we are supporting developing countries throughout the Asia-Pacific region. Many are facing similar developmental challenges and issues, or at least there's a lot of similarities between what they're facing and what Vietnam is facing. So given that, what's been done in another country, what's worked well, perhaps what has not worked well, that's all very valuable information for us to pass on to our developing member countries in general, and of course here in Vietnam. So this cross-fertilization of good practices and knowledge and hard lessons learned elsewhere can be quite a good contribution. So regarding the process of supporting reforms, what can we as an organization do? Involves, diagnostic studies requested that can help inform decision makers, study tours to other countries, again, with a similar issue and how something has been done to address it, training, bringing relative experts to bear to present and inform, but more importantly for them to understand from the experts here and from the officials the particular local context and challenges, so that whatever information or advice they have is practical and implementable as possible. Another consideration is the timing and sequence of reforms in general. There may be a broader vision and where you want to head, but that vision may require a series of small steps. So areas that we've supported are in a number of areas, including environmental and land use areas, supporting various ministries and regulatory authorities such as the Electric Regulatory of Vietnam on various power sector items, public procurement matters. We're involved a lot in the public-private partnership law, various financial and banking sector matters. So as for results and progress, Vietnam has a very relatively well-developed legal and institutional frameworks in place for the public sector. The government applies an extensive planning system that covers the national, central, and provincial governments with 10 and 5-year strategies, financial and budgetary plans, numerous sectoral plans, and there's been a steady focus on institutional reforms that have ensured, I think you can focus on the challenges of Vietnam, but I think it's also important to focus on the successes. There's a dynamic business environment. There's been very high sustained and quite inclusive economic growth along the last number of decades. So of course, challenges remain. And there's not a country or a government on earth that shouldn't be thinking about reforms and the reform process for their various challenges. So as for a few recommendations, and I'll come back to the land issue because that's really more of an important topic for this particular event. But public financial management system of the central government, and the provinces is a relatively well-functioning and regularly updated system with a clearly delineated institutional framework. So we're continuing to work with the government on strengthening the revenue forecasting capacity and revenue and budgeting ability of provinces, helping identify relevant revisions to the framework of expenditure assignments across government agencies, supporting tax reform and to strengthen domestic resource mobilization, improve the operation and maintenance expenditure budgeting for capital projects, because in the past there's been some issues where there's money budgeted to build or construct an asset, but the ongoing budgeting of maintaining that asset in some cases could require strengthening. And will help to continue strengthening the capacity of the State Audit Office of Vietnam as the leading agency to monitor the quality of audit undertaken by external auditors for public sector projects. In the financial sector, banking sector is quite dominant.
Andrew, but I'm sorry, Andrew, but the time is limited.
Oh, I didn't realize it.
Maybe the final recommendation.
Sure.
Thank you.
Let me get to the land matters quickly then. Major challenges. This is, of course, a very complex issue. Especially in a country like Vietnam that's growing so fast. Urbanization is happening so fast, and so there's been this talk about how to value land, and it's much harder to value land in such a changing, growing environment. Of course, land acquisition and conversion, including the valuation mechanisms and how to compensate people properly, how to resettlement people properly, and very importantly, how to resolve complaints and address grievances during this process, because that's going to be inevitable. Okay. This is, again, a very complex area that's been touched upon by others. The government may wish to consider lifting current limitations on agricultural use for designated rice lands that are particularly not productive ones, but there's some where rice cultivation is not economically viable. And it's important to consider increasing the ceiling size of land holdings to support some agricultural consolidation and scale. Land valuation and compensation and resettlement payments, property tax calculations and the like should be calculated based on the market value. And again, this is a complex area. And increasingly, the property taxes below the, the revenue losses to the government can be considerable if this isn't done right. And I'll end finally by just saying the digital land information, a digital land information system would be quite important to enable transparent access to information and contribute to the more efficient land use and more decision making around land. So I'll end there and just say that we stand ready to continue being a development partner of Vietnam as Vietnam progresses and tries to reach its kind of near to medium-term goal of becoming an upper middle-income country by 2030. Thank you.
Rất là cảm ơn Andrew
Thank you, Andrew, and I hope that IDB will continue to work closely with Vietnam in the time to come, especially in institutional reform in general and land-related policy in particular. Not much time is left, so in the first intervention, Minister Trần Hồng Hoa speaks for only about 4 minutes, but most of the topics today are related to the land law. So if Minister wished to have further sharing with us, then you can have 3 to 4 more minutes. Thank you very much for all your interventions, all my colleagues. There are thousands of input, of feedback from the people. The differences, the diversity in all the opinions is quite understandable because land is a very significant, far-reaching, and complex issue that involves a lot of different stakeholders. But most importantly, which ground, which will be the criteria to select the most suitable feedback? We have to take into consideration the interest of the nations, of the people, and a ground to ensure transparency, equality when we allocate this interest. At this moment, there are 2 different opinions regarding the resolutions. So majority believes that the land will be handed over based on the bidding or by appointment. And the rights to land use, the conversions of the land used without bidding, is another flow of opinions. So this reflects the opinions of the government on these 2 different approaches. In this draft law, we have identified that for cases that the land used, for example, agricultural land, the resettlement, reshuffling of the land, then will not require bidding. But for a business, if want to use the land for commercial purposes, for housing purposes, then the rights to the determination of the land will belong to the state. So the most important tool is that through the national assemblies, through the regular sessions of the national assemblies, we will ask for the inputs of the people for the outstanding issues with a goodwill and constructive spirit. We have to ensure transparency, equality, and the interest of the majority. Thank you, Minister, for the information and the way forward in order to come up with the harmonious law that accommodate the interest of other people. So we have 7 more minutes before the end of the discussion this morning. So for the 7 minutes, I would like to invite all the participants to involve in the Q&A sessions. So is there any question from the floor? Please raise your hand.
Please stick to 3 minutes and introduce yourself before you raise the question. Leaders of the party, state, Đồng Anh Tuấn, head of the legal department of BCCI, with regards to the very important issue of the institutional reform in the land sector. I have one comment and a very short recommendation. First of all, with regards to the approach to the land issue by SMEs, I understand that it is very difficult for SME to access the land, and I understand that there is no policy dedicated to the SME. At the moment, the private SME cannot access the industrial parks due to the conditions of payment of area used, and they also cannot compete with others because it's know-who is more important than know-how in Vietnam, and also the allocation of land in Vietnam is very problematic, and the enforcement of the SME supporting policies is not effective. Some local leadership even not they don't even know about this very important law, and it is not enforcing in the reality. So the proportion of SMEs accessing land is very low. So a lot of them are having great difficulties, and they have to run business in their own locations, and they do not have access to land, to property. And so their development is very limited. So for the upcoming revised land law, we have the following recommendations. The spirit of the law, as mentioned by the Minister of Natural Resources, is through auction. And if you choose use auction, then it will be very difficult for SMEs to access the the land. I know that you have to prevent the loss of revenue, but there must be land reserved for industrial production. And if the cost of land is too high, then our products cannot compete with other countries' products. And at the moment, there is a lot of overlapping regulations, and that's why the cost for land is very high, and only big companies can have access to land. And I think this is very important. And also, we need less guiding documents or instructions. At the moment, we have 25 decrees and 59 circulars, and 46 are issued by Monterey. And it's very difficult to cover all these documents. So please have in place some instructions for SMEs only. We do not have any more time for discussion or questions from the audience, but I understand that we have been working very closely to address the overlapping of laws. And I think in the future, what matters is the solutions for these overlapping issues. And finally, once again, thank you very much, our speakers, our panelists, and I myself think this is a very fruitful discussion, very straightforward, and I now conclude our discussion today, and may I invite Mr. Nguyễn Thành Phong, Vice President of Ho Chi Minh National Academy of Politics, to deliver the concluding remarks. Esteemed leaders of the party and state, distinguished delegates, we have the very fruitful working sessions, the systematic discussions on stepping up the implementations, especially on land-related policies, have been great success. On behalf of the organizers, I would like to thank for the active preparations of the organizing committees, the Committee for Economic Affairs of the Law Commissions, and other relevant agencies of the National Assembly. I also highly appreciate the active participation of all the ministries, agencies, provinces, businesses. We will listen to the interventions by Mr. Hoàng Văn Tùng, Chairman of the National Assembly's Committee on Laws, Professor Hoàng Văn Cường, and Professor Đặng Hồng Võ, former Vice Minister of Natural Resources and Environment. Especially, we also have the interventions for the Ministers of Finance and Minister of Environment and Natural Resources. All the discussions focus on the key topic on how to step up institutional reforms and the ameliorations of the land-related policies to enhance the effectiveness of the law enforcement, and also from the input and the experience from the international organizations have identified that institutional reform is a breakthrough and important groundwork to achieve all the set targets. Law enforcement is also very useful, and during this process, we also have to be we will be able to identify all the bottlenecks to be removed and come up with the need to further improve the legal system and to bring into the law into life. And in the recent time, we have achieved some certain outcome. We have been able to timely institutionalize all the policies of the party and state on the prevention of the pandemic and support the people to overcome the consequences of the pandemic. Continue to review all the overlapping and bottlenecks to turn the challenges into the opportunities for development. And third, the enhancement of the institutional building process is conducted actively. And fourth, the supervisions of law enforcement has been further strengthened. And the ameliorations of the land law in the time to come will bring about positive impacts and make
land an important resources for socio-economic development and improve the life of the people. We have to enhance the role of the state in land management to increase the ownership representative of the state and to harmonize the interest between the state, the investors, and the people, with people placed at the centers and that no one is left behind. The speakers highlight that institutional reforms will be very useful and makes land become an important resources for socio-economic development and improvement of the life of the people. So planning should be renewed in terms of the contents and the ways of doing, and completely solve all the shortcomings in the planning. And second, the land finance and planning should be further enhanced, and we should also have the digital information system. And another input is that the price of the land has to reflect the market, and the tax collections should be in line with the people. So the land price and the land financial policies, apart from the tax policies, has been touched upon in the land law, but other tax, for example, the property tax, the revenue tax, have not been touched upon. The land capitalization in the state and the private sectors and the land capitalization policies all have to focus on the revenues collected from the land, but we also have to focus on the revenue from other properties on the land. We also have to remove all the shortcomings in land bidding and auctions. Any property has to be closely linked to the land. Therefore, the calculations of the land value is very important in order to determine the business values of all the properties. All the land-related policies also have impact on the real estate market. The changes, the amendments from administrative tools towards the market tools in the management of the land will avoid losses, but also allow us to select the most capable investors to best use the land. And in the planning,
land use, duration, and the value of real estate and properties are also important. And land use for a business purpose should be limited in terms of use duration. In the future, we basically agree with the following points. The first is to promote the role of law and improve the legal frameworks and increase the efficiency of law making, focusing on the following methods. Change the mindset on lawmaking and increase the capability for lawmakers and enforcers, and strengthen the discipline in lawmaking, supervision, revision of legal documents. Second, with regards to land law improvement, we should focus on the following points. Change the financial policy with regards to land, to use properly the revenue from land and land rent, and ensure transparency and have law in accordance with international standards, and impose a higher tax for those with a lot of lands and who use land ineffectively for areas that are used to ensure food security. Policy must be put in place. The pricing of the land must be in accordance with the market and focus on the property handover tax, and reflected this in the contracts and covered by the land law. There must be specific regulations on the tax and have in place the data for tax and use software and application to calculate these figures. Increase the commercialization of land use rights. Have in place the policy for managing agricultural land and build the database for land use and have in place the law for the use of land with many purposes. For agricultural land that are used for tourism and business purposes, for registration and transaction of the land. All of this must be conducted through the exchange instead of the notary services at this moment. The pricing of the land must be in accordance with those set by the market, and the authority must compensate or revoke the land in accordance with the law. Within their power, those whose land are revoked are compensated and are enabled to have an equal or better life following the revoke of land. Impose high tax on the differences of land rent and the a large plot of land. Planning must be in accordance with the real estate development strategy and the scale of the economy, and control and supervise the financial capability of investors to avoid slow projects and pending projects, and increase the capital resources for these projects. Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the co-chairs, once again, thank you very much. The committees of the National Assemblies and the specialists, experts and participants for your comments. And I now declare the conclusion of our discussion. I wish you good health, success and happiness.
Diễn đàn Kinh tế xã xã hội Việt Nam VSEP 2022 là diễn đàn thường niên bàn về những vấn đề thời sự quan trọng nhất của đời sống kinh tế xã hội của đất nước. Diễn đàn do Ủy ban Kinh tế của Quốc hội, Ban Kinh tế Trung ương, Học viện Chính trị Quốc gia Hồ Chí Minh và Viện Hàn lâm Khoa học Xã hội Việt Nam phối hợp tổ chức vào Chủ nhật ngày 18 tháng 9 năm 2022 tại Trung tâm Hội nghị Quốc gia, thủ đô Hà Nội.